Thank you, Julie. I appreciate the introduction, and thank you all for joining us this afternoon. I'm looking forward to a good conversation with you here today, Dave. We've got a lot of slides to move through, so if, as Julia said, if there's anything, and we get to the end, or if there's any slides that we move through quickly, if you have questions, please feel free to ask at that point. All right, so just real quickly, I'll introduce myself and Gen3i. So really, we are a team of subject matter experts. I co-founded the company about 11 years ago. We're specialized in data protection, data storage, data management solutions. It's really kind of all we do. And as such, we're sort of a vendor, we take a vendor agnostic approach. So we have engineers and experts across a range of technologies in the data protection space. We work very closely with the Caresoft team to vet and prove solutions in a data protection lab that we have there. So we're deploying multiple different software, hardware, cloud, tape, disk storage combinations there, and vetting out scenarios and solutions for customers. And then we work really closely with all the vendors as well. So we have certifications, technical engineering and sales certifications with all of the different vendors, including obviously Cohesity. And one of the, I guess, niche, having been in the data protection and backup space for as long as we have, we've developed some unique capabilities around legacy backup solutions. So, anytime you're looking at changing backup vendors, there's always the question of what do we do with the data that we have in the old system. And so we have some unique solutions around that we will touch on later. Just extending a little bit more into the services. So we do offer a range of things from implementation, architecture design, implementation, identifying gaps in feature coverage and implementing those things. And then, as I mentioned, the legacy backup migration services. We've got some different capabilities there that are unique. So I'm just going to do a very brief sort of the state of backup as I see it today. Working sort of across all the different vendors, I kind of get to see a lot of the different trends of what different people are doing. And so I just wanted to speak a little bit about the landscape of how I see data protection in the federal space today. So briefly, before we get into that, just a quick history, and I've sold every one of these technologies and deployed each of these technologies over the last 20, 25 years. Just kind of a history of how we got here, right? So when I started out, people were backing up pretty much exclusively to tape or some other removable media. As things like disk-based backups and deduplication came out, I saw new vendors, new technologies come along and introduce capabilities that aligned with those requirements. And then virtualization introduced a whole new wave of backup vendors that were more specialized on working with virtual machines versus physical machines. The next wave was hyper-converged. As you see, Cohesity is one of the leaders in the space, came to the market early with a hyper-converged infrastructure, and really sort of led the charge where I think all of the vendors have deployed and begun offering those types of solutions. And then finally, now we're in the AI, machine learning, and I would say even moving into the MSP type of era where you're seeing the features of the AI and machine learning coming into the data protection space and the data security space. But then now I'm also seeing more recently than that, a lot of people looking to backup as a service, storage as a service, DR as a service type of solutions. So that's just kind of the history from my perspective. I'll move past this one quickly. Everybody knows that you've got data everywhere now. It's coming from, whether it's your Teams or your Zoom or your different SaaS applications, people working from home, et cetera. So there's data everywhere. I think everybody kind of gets that. More relevant, I think, to this conversation would be, the regulations and the requirements that are being put on federal agencies today. And I'd say the top three to me, at least in the last 2 years or so, essentially capstone requirement came out last January in 23, basically saying that you had to be keeping text, chat messages, et cetera, from those top tier executives. Zero trust architecture. I don't think anybody here hasn't heard that brought up in some capacity or another recently, but in terms of data, particularly the data pillar, the security, of the data, who's accessing it, when, where, and et cetera. and locking it down as much as possible is obviously a key component of any zero trust architecture. And then finally, as I mentioned, the MSP sort of era, I think a lot of the vendors are offering, you know, whether it's backup as a service or storage as a service or some combination of those things. The big requirement clearly in federal is that the vendors or the customers taking advantage of those are increasingly going to have requirements for FedRAMP authorization for that. So I think that's kind of a big one. There's some other, you know, obviously big things on this page that I won't spend too much time on, but things like the SBOM, where and when and how the code was written, I think are going to be more and more relevant in the next couple of years. So I don't think that I need to tell anybody this. I don't think this is a surprise, but ransomware is first and foremost in everybody's mind. I kind of laugh because I've been selling data protection and backup for a really long time, and it used to be, you know, people would have to picture a building disappearing to consider it a disaster scenario. And now I think everybody's expecting to have a, you know, quote, disaster any day, you know, based on the cyber threats that are out there. From my perspective, that makes disaster recovery the next frontier, where I think a lot of people have looked at it as having a copy of data offsite somewhere that they're going to be able to get back to it. I think it's more about how are you going to get that system back up and running when this actually happens. And, you know, I think we're sort of entering an era where there's more of a bring the compute to the data, I think is the direction it's kind of going. But really the key here is that everybody's expecting ransomware. More and more people, I mean, you see here 74% of organizations are using third-party protection for Office 365. It's because it's not just ransomware, it's insider threats, it's accidental deletion. There's a lot of different ways that you need to be securing this data. And so I think just from a security perspective, things like everybody's got to have immutable air-gap copies. Every vendor that you're looking at better have integration with security vendors in terms of making, you know, being aware of what's happening in the environment outside of just the immediate context of the backup space. But they are still going to have built-in capabilities within the backup applications that really, you know, provide that security within the backup, because it is becoming the first target for a lot of people. More and more I hear stories where the first thing they do is go in and try to delete or encrypt the backup. And then lastly, it's not just encrypting it either, it's exfiltration. So who's getting into that data and getting it out? So there's a lot of things that you need to be considering from a security perspective when you're looking at your backup provider. I'll move through this fairly quickly, but I will just say, like I was saying, the cyber threats have made, I say this maybe inappropriately, but it's made backup sexy again. It used to be really boring. Nobody wanted to talk about backup, but now it's the first line of defense, right? And so if you look at the landscape with the cyber threats out there, the recovery time objective is becoming shorter and shorter. We got to get back up and running immediately, and we got to plan for a disaster in terms of how quickly we're going to get back up and running. But on the other side of the recovery point objective, I would argue is getting further and further back, because you need to be able to go back to that clean copy of the data before whatever incident happened, and you may not know when that is. So, you know, having backup application that's going to be able to help you identify when and where that, you know, started and then get back in front of it is a critical part of any solution out there. I hit this a little bit already, but obviously there's data in the clouds. I sort of think of it more backing up to from between clouds essentially. But the big trends I see in the cloud space here are, again, the backup as a service and more and more DR as a service. I think all the vendors are starting to provide more capabilities around that. I'd argue, no offense, Dave, but that none of them are really where I'd like them to be in terms of making that automated and easy. But then the other side is the economics of it. It's gotten a lot cheaper to use cloud storage for at least certain data sets. And so being able to incorporate that into your overall backup strategy and where and when you have copies and which you're coming back from in a recovery scenario is increasingly important. And then obviously, I've already said it, but the FedRAMP is a huge requirement. I think everybody that I've talked to about any of the various backup as a service offerings over the last 6 to 18 months. They've said they either have a FedRAMP requirement or it's coming soon. DoD, obviously, but even in the civilian space. Next, just the use of AI. I think everybody's heard AI to death, and I sort of laugh about this. I think it's not really that new in the backup space that machine learning and AI are being used to do some sort of predictive, behavior analysis or threat detection or, things like that. Increasingly, I think you'll see more automation and reliance on the AI for adaptive policy in a way. And if this data is not being used ever or hasn't changed, then why are we backing it up and moving it and copying it all the time? I think you'll start to see more automation from that perspective, and then certainly from a security perspective, right? So I didn't mention it in the cyber security slide, but ransomware as a service is a thing, right? People are out there taking advantage of other tools and AI to attack you, so you've got to be using the same exact measures to defend yourself, right? And so I think you're going to see AI, as we'll talk about in a minute here with Cohesity's offerings, is going to be a huge central part of the story from the backup and data protection vendors, but it's really going to be integral in the security aspects of how you're protecting that data and staying on top of those constant threats. Just looking forward a bit, the last bullet here kind of blends into the next slide around data management. So really, I see the next frontier as something that kind of comes from the e-discovery and litigation space, where automatic records classification of data for records retention, right? So I do see it's getting to where you'll have your data management platform essentially tagging federal records for you automatically and learning and working with it and training it. But that should be absolutely part of the future of where any of these data platforms are going to go. So that's I think, that's the end of that first section. So here we have our first polling question. So everybody want to take a minute and fill that out? We'll just sit tight. So are you considering changing backup vendors in the next 18 months? We got about 17% yes, 33%. So it's about 50-50, which falls in line with the stat that I have in here later. About 54% of customers say that they are very likely or definitely changing backup vendors. So that sort of looks to be pretty much what I would expect, I guess. All right. You want to move on here?
Yep, let's roll.
All right. So next up, if I can advance, there we go. All right. So enough about my take on what people are doing in the data protection space. We've got Dave here, Dave Kushner, the VP Federal at Cohesity, to talk about some of the things that they, as a leading vendor in the space, are doing today, which I'm excited to hear.
Well, outstanding. And thank you, Patrick. Thank you, Caresoft, for hosting us here. My name's Dave Kushner. I'm the Vice President of Federal at Cohesity. And certainly there were a lot of key and critical points that Patrick hit on, and you can advance to the next slide. But I think he's right in that we are now looking at backup data protection as truly a first tier application because of the challenges around ransomware. And what I'll talk about is, more along the lines of ConOps, or continuity of operations, because there are just an enormous amount of complexities. Patrick hit it. There's data at the edge. There's texts. There's Zoom chats. There's application data, either in the cloud or on-prem. The complexity is massive, and how to really be able to protect yourself and manage all of that data in a very complex environment, and most importantly, how do I leverage that data as being able to derive insights out of it. And AI is going to absolutely be, it's funny, we'll talk about AI in a second, but Cohesity was the first to market with a RAG AI solution called Gaia, which we'll talk about a little bit more. But certainly that is the complexity is the challenge. And then you move to, the security aspect of what Patrick kind of keyed in on. It's being able to build security innate into your data management platform rather than bolting it on. And then more importantly, having the capability to integrate into other cybersecurity solutions that you may have deployed out there to have two-way traffic across those applications for intervention, as well as threat detection, and being proactive in being able to protect yourself. And then we talk about data mobility in data's everywhere. How do I maintain all of the protections that I need, the data management that I need, but also giving access to the data and the applications and things that people need to get their job done. And then there are silos of data out there that I also, Patrick kind of keyed in on it, that if I'm not utilizing it, if I haven't touched it, am I backing it up, or have I made it immutable so that it can't be altered, encrypted, edited? The last thing is the data insights, and this is the one I'm so excited about, especially in the federal market. We'll talk about being able to derive value out of data that is normally locked in the closet and waiting for that rainy day. And I'll show a slide on it in a second, but it certainly is one of the exciting things that we're doing here at Cohesity. So let me move on. All right. Well, I think we've all talked about how many, it's not an if, it's a when. The threat of ransomware attacks across the federal, state, and local government, and frankly, everywhere is up. Federal government gets hit every 11 seconds. So how do I combat that? And then really, what is my data resilience, my cyber resilience, my business resilience strategy in terms of how can I, when I get hit, how can I eliminate a long time of being down? I mean, it's amazing. We hear about the hacks all the time. Our latest one was AT&T, which I got an email about because apparently all my text messages and all of ours were hacked. So, how long does it take to be able to get back up from a continuity of operations perspective? 95% of the study that we did, and it was massive. It was across all different industries and manufacturers and government, and they said 95% of them said it take over 24 hours to get back up. 71, 4 days, 41% over a week. Can you imagine one of our federal agencies being down for over a week? Or let's say the IRS, we aren't able to submit our tax returns in time. Continuity of operations is very key in terms of thinking about why I'm going to implement, that next generation of data management, AI-powered data management, data security platform. Move on. So what is Cohesity's mission? It is really to protect, secure, and provide insights into all of the world's data. We talk about, very large agencies in the federal market. We talk about a lot of large banking systems, and I think we've got a next slide on, some of a slice of our customers. But it's amazing that I'm very proud that we actually have such a vast array of very strong customers that, really embrace the Cohesity strategy and not only what we do today, but where we're going. Go ahead, Patrick. So, 40, just quickly, 4,300 plus customers. So it's definitely not, we've been around for 10 years. And we certainly have a large amount of Fortune 100s, and you see that it is across, all of the, you know, whether it's education, whether it's being able to protect the financial, whether it's uh, able to protect our healthcare data, or the
The war fighter, like,
yeah, or the war fighter. I mean, it's funny you mentioned the war fighter. I talk about the edge a lot. And I talk a lot about, cohesivity is in some places at the tip of the spear. And, that is because they trust cohesivity and our capability to give them the right data at the right time and be able to execute on whatever mission they're trying to do. But it's wide adoption across all of these different places and for, obviously different reasons. But in the federal space, we'll talk about USDA and a little bit at the end of the presentation, but when they were looking to solve their cloud challenge, and being able to not only manage their data on-prem, but also in the cloud, they looked at Cohesity because of our single pane of glass platform that allows them, wherever the data is, to be able to manage it effectively, protect it effectively, and be able to integrate into various security and cybersecurity applications that they have. So moving on. All right. And, Patrick mentioned this. It was very important. It did take Cohesity a fair amount of time. It was well worth the wait. But we are now FedRAMP moderate, and being able to deploy those backup as a service applications for M365 workloads and things like that is so very key and critical. And we will continue to add through the FedRAMP process, new capabilities, building upon the backup as a service application that Cohesity runs in the cloud.
But you're being modest, Dave. This is not an easy, putt to make. And I've seen a lot of the vendors go through this process and take several years to get through it. I think you guys did it actually faster than almost anybody I've seen. And so I think you're being a little bit modest. And there's only, in my knowledge, 2 or 3 out there that can say even something similar to this. So I think it's a pretty unique capability, and it's one to be aware of.
No, I appreciate that. And, it's important because of the mission of our federal government. I wake up thinking about that every day. And having that FedRAMP moderate capability shows the commitment that we have as Cohesity to the federal market and to the federal government's mission. So, moving on to the 5 S's, it's funny, the speed, security, simplicity, smarts, and scale. Uh, I love talking about this because it I think it really sets us apart from a lot of the different other organizations that are in our space. And we love to do proofs of concept to show the capability of an instant mass restore, fastest recovery on the market to be able to go and solve that continuity of operations problem. Now, I also really like to talk about security because as we at Cohesity say, it takes a village, and it takes various different cybersecurity and security solutions to be able to truly come together, integrate, talk to each other to be able to identify anomalies, identify threats. We built this in from the beginning in our hyperconverged platform. Security was not a bolt-on. It was thought through, and then our Data Security Alliance, which allows us to integrate and have certified integration with the likes of all the major cybersecurity companies out there, is truly important. Then I like to talk about the simplicity. This is complex stuff. And in order for, when I talk to our customers out, especially in the federal market, they love that single pane of glass. They love to be able to go and, manage their entire environment, whether it's in the cloud, on-prem, out at the edge. utilizing that single pane of glass, and then being able to scale. Having to scale not only to petabytes but exabytes using a hyperconverged platform is huge. And then the smarts piece is what excited me the most when I we started talking about Gaia. And I mentioned this, and we have a slide on it in a second, but there is a massive amount of data that I always like to say is locked in the closet waiting for a rainy day or some sort of cyber event or human error event. But what if we were able to derive value and insights out of that data locked in a closet, essentially making it that secondary data lake in your customer's environment, your environment? That has a ton of value. And we'll talk a little bit about why, what we're doing around Gaia, and the RAG AI solution that we built it upon.
But you get me excited there, Dave, because getting that data under your management is where we come into play.
Well, that's where Gen3 AI comes in. On day two, we're able to go and get Cohesity installed, but truly being able to utilize Patrick's and their experience and expertise, only makes an application, a solution like Cohesity really shine. So just quantifying this, I'll go quickly on this one, but I think that we truly looked at being able to reduce the total cost of ownership, and not having so much labor, infrastructure, power, space, and cooling requirements, hugely important. And then being able to have those immutable backups, and then be able to have that security aspect to detect threats, essentially, sometimes proactively, obviously sometimes reactively, but having that efficiency and operational expertise and in your environment is so important. And then being able to actually increase your staff's productivity, that is allows us to do more of the key and critical things that we need to do in whatever your organization's environment means. So now we go to question 2.
Yep. This one about 10 more seconds and move on.
Bet.
I think this may be a trick question. I think the correct answer may be a typo. All right.
All right.
Here.
So, this is really the slide that I was referencing a few minutes ago around being able to, think about that secondary data set. It's a lot of unstructured data, it's VMs, it's, all your databases, files, all that. Previous to Gaia, what I would have to do as an IT administrator to be able to make sure that I'm managing and securing and in my data is that primary data, I'm usually, that's maybe 30, 60, 90 days. Then I'm archiving, I'm backing up data into my secondary environment. Now, before Gaia came along, what would I have to do? Well, if I wanted to derive any sort of insight out of that secondary data, I would have to essentially, number one, go find the right data set and hope I did. Number two, then be able to have to hydrate it back into that primary data set and then be able to go and derive value. I had a conversation with a customer about this, and he said, it takes probably weeks to do that. And sometimes I never even get what I was hopefully looking for. Now, with Gaia, I can open up that secondary data set and utilize it as a secondary data lake to be able to go and maybe ask questions, compare, contrast from maybe what I saw, in an agency or, in some sort of data set a year ago versus, 30 days ago versus 5 hours ago. I can now do that. That's so important, I think, to be able to have, various use cases for customers to actually utilize the data that has always been there, but not accessible. So what do we do? And we kind of talked a little bit about this, but I think that the backup and data protection aspect that's the table stakes. There's a lot of organizations that can do that backup and data protection, but really it's our key of a complete platform that allows that security that security aspect to be able to integrate into, let's say, ServiceNow, let's say Palo, let's say Splunk, whoever it is, and be able to provide a larger bubble of protection outside of just the backup and disaster recovery. So then, we talked a little bit before about the data mobility aspect. Again, we have, 3 copies of my data. Where is it all residing? What do I have to actually, if one system goes down or one data center loses power, or my cloud is the cloud that I was in was compromised. Being able to utilize that data mobility aspect in the Cohesity Data Cloud is so important, and then being able to provide that access when they need it, how they need it, wherever they are. And then the insight aspect. That's why this is so, I think, important to be able to offer all of this in essentially one platform. How are we doing on time, by the way? I was actually curious about that.
We're good. We have about 5 more minutes for this section.
Okay, perfect. 5 more minutes, and then I'll pass it back to you. I promise. So, being able to, reduce that TCO. How do we do it though? That really comes down to, a platform that is very simple to operate, manage, and utilize as a single pane of glass. And I hate saying that, but that's really what it is. To lower those TCO within an agency, an organization, whatever it is. And I mentioned our fastest recovery time. See, that's the pane of glass. I love it. And it makes it easy. And then I talked a little bit about all of that ecosystem to support an enterprise. So important to be able not only to have, whether I have mainframe requirements, whether I have edge requirements, whether I'm deploying in, various different clouds with various different, both virtual, physical storage, database, you name it. This is our platform really sits between all of it to be able to effectively manage all, we call it AI-powered security and data management. And that's truly what it is. And that's, we're the first to market. So moving on. So, we talk about the NIST frameworks, and you can layer in the Executive Order 14028 around cybersecurity. All of these things are coming. Patrick mentioned the SBOM, secure bill of materials. That all of these things are kind of converging, especially in the federal market, where you better be committed as Cohesity is to the federal market to be able to address all of these challenges within, that NIST framework, the executive order, or you name it, because the ransomware attacks are happening. All of the sensitive data that we have deployed across our environments need to be protected. And, it's a shame that 68% of the available business data goes underleveraged or not leveraged at all because it's not accessible. So,
I think this is a key of what you've said, and not to steal your thunder, Dave, but I think that, everybody's got, and you guys have been leading the charge of announcements of integrations with all of these different providers, but I think what may get lost in that is how much internal built-in capability is there, whereas everybody can announce a partnership or an integration or an API or whatever with another company, but having the core engine inside of the product is also a key component of that.
Oh, absolutely. And that's why, when I say built in, not bolted on, that is in a very important aspect. And, again, we built this with security in mind because, our founder saw, that vision of, man, data management and data protection is truly it's going to be so important from not only a continuity of operations perspective, but being able to utilize, not only what we built in, but also that ecosystem to be able to vault, do cyber vaulting, to actually be able to find anomalies within access of certain data. Because as Patrick mentioned, those backups are the actual target a lot of times because they're, again, I keep saying this, locked in the closet, and nobody's looking at that data except the ransomware pirates and the folks that are trying to access it, encrypt it, steal it, exfil it, you name it. So very important. And then being able to utilize that SOC integration, I think. We take security very seriously. You see on the right, we have Kevin Mandia, Marianne Bailey. These people have been a part of the security of securing our federal government, but really important to have all of those different data security alliance partners where there is, oh yeah, here we go.
Sorry, I apologize. I'm moving.
No worries. That's okay. So what percentage of customers?
Just going to give about 30 seconds for this one so we can keep moving forward.
It would be very interesting to see the answer. Did you come up with that question or did Jay?
This was mine.
I like this. It is increasingly, I think, happening that more and more people are storing that data in the cloud. But when I look at storing data in the cloud, it's I liken it to yeah, it's in the cloud, it's protected. Well, it's funny. I always make this analogy. I'm like, when you pull your car into a parking garage, do you leave it unlocked?
Right. Yeah, that's perfect. It's a perfect example.
Yeah, you lock it up. And that's what we have to be. Everyone has to be thinking about that from a cloud perspective.
Yeah, the answer to that one is a surprising number. All right, let's talk about Gaia.
All right, let's talk about Gaia. I kind of hit on this, but that visibility. We'll go back one. It's that visibility into that dark data. We could call it cold data, dark data, whatever it is, but it's usually it's not indexed. And there's that need to actually rehydrate it back. I can't search it. I have to try to find the data set that I would want to be able to rehydrate it. Not anymore. So moving on to the next slide, truly bringing that compute to the data, and in whatever it is, if it's a distributed architecture across the cloud or on-prem or edge, wherever it is, being able to access that data to truly derive value. I mean, like I said, there's all kinds of use cases that our customers are coming up with on utilizing Gaia that really excite me because being able to actually do that data classification, and then we always call it ask questions of your data. Which is so key and critical to not only security aspect, because we talk about ransomware, we talk about anomalies, we talk about threat intelligence, but also just to do some capacity prediction, planning, and those are the types of things that Patrick and Gen 3 AI utilize to be able to help you plan not just for what is going to happen tomorrow, but 2 years from now, 3 years from now. So, as I mentioned, this is being able to offer the first to offer retrieval augmented generative AI for that secondary data. What's also interesting about our Gaia solution is, we built some large language models in there, but you can also bring your own to the table. That I think is very key because there's a lot of organizations that have started developing their own LLMs for specific use cases for their environments, and now they can bring those to the table as well as utilizing our capability. But we also talk about the RBAC control aspect of it. So again, with security in mind, and making sure that folks cannot access all of that data. Okay. And being able to only give them access to what they have the capability to access. And I think from a security aspect, that's hugely important. So this is truly, and we talk about, governed by responsible AI. What does that mean? And I'll let people answer that question. But when I talk about AI, I think about it as it's only as good as the principles and the intent of the people who develop it and then use it. And I think it's also important to kind of ensuring clean data so that we have set out to deliver that modernized capability, but also having a lot of the capability to utilize that data and derive value out of it. So,
awesome. I think that.
All right, where are we at?
Yeah, I think that ends. I think that ends the section here. Hold on. There we go. Yep. All right. I think that's it. I appreciate Dave, you going through the overview there, and I'm excited about a lot of the things you said, especially in the AI space. I'm sort of an AI nerd, and I think there's a lot of ways that I could see it being used, like you said, like the auto classification, identifying, old data, stale data, like just, there's a lot of ways I could see it getting implemented in the future. All right, so now we talked about modern data protection, Cohesity's offerings in that space, and I just wanted to spend a couple minutes talking about, okay, if you are going to change backup vendors, you're going to implement a new data protection, data management solution, then there's always the question that comes up of what do I do with the data that was left, in the old system previously. So pulling a stat here, I will admit it's from another vendor's analyst report, but essentially doesn't matter. 54% of people are saying that they're very likely to change backup vendors in the next 12 to 18 months. And that pretty much falls right in line with, I think, what we saw the results at the beginning of the conversation here. Some of the reasons, I've hit a lot of these, we talked about a lot of these. I think some of the things around CapEx to OpEx are driving that requirement. Certainly vendors, change their pricing models and use the various things. And there's a lot of reasons that people end up, making the decision to change backup vendors. But really, I want to talk a little bit about, why when they do that, they end up leaving some data in an old backup system. I can't tell you how many customers I know that have, and I won't call any of you out by name, but 2, 3, 4 different backup vendors in one environment. And so this has been something that I've been selling backup solutions for 25 years, and it's always been hard for me to understand. Every time somebody buys a new solution, they keep the old one around for the next 10 years. And so I've sort of grappled with this for a long time, and what causes that to happen. There's obviously, the pain of getting off of the old system. There's usually a backup admin or somebody who's the guy on that system that's got some job security tied up in it. There's, oh, it's easier to do it, it's complicated to move it, whatever it is. And I can understand all of those different answers, and there's certainly times and places where it makes sense to keep the old system in place. But in the interest of some of the things Dave's talking about, getting all of that data under one platform, being able to have that visibility and understanding of all the data that's out there, I do think it becomes critical to get rid of those old legacy silos of data, because people call us every single day with, hey, we've got XYZ backup system and all these old tapes, and we've had them for 15 years, but we have to keep them for another 10 years, and now the hardware and the vendor doesn't want to support it, and nobody knows how to use this, and what can we do? And so Gen3i has basically through our experience with various different data protection vendors, has come up with some unique solutions around how you get rid of that old backup vendor, for lack of a better phrase. So a lot of that starts with where backup was 20 years ago, right? So tape. We have some unique capabilities and software and expertise around reading any backup, any tape from any backup vendor. So I don't care who wrote it. Our guys or our team have either a handler right now that can go read that tape, or can reverse engineer a handler that will read that tape. And so we've got, between that and a storage closet, locked away with 100 different versions of tape drives, we've sort of got the ability to read any of those old tapes. And that includes scanning the tape to understand what backup wrote it, what software wrote it, what we can generate a catalog off of that, just scanning the tape. So we can do various things that involve essentially catalog manipulation from there. So we will go into a customer environment, and they've got, name your backup vendor. Let's just say TSM, because I like to pick on them. So we'll go in and we can extract the catalog, the backup database from that system. We normalize it into a table format that we use, and then we're able to provide that to customers to be able to query or search or whatever. And so there's a variety of services we end up offering around catalog manipulation, management, extraction, hosting, et cetera. And the combination of the catalog capabilities that we have in conjunction with the tape restore capabilities, where we don't need the underlying backup software that wrote it, we combine those things into a restore on demand type of a solution, where we can provide an affordable option to retain access to that old data. And then on the flip side is the full migration, right? So we'll go in, if you come to us and say we have 10,000 tapes and we need to figure out through the catalog which data we need to move, migrate into Cohesity, we'll help you figure out which tapes and which data you want. And then, unfortunately, it is a rehydration process if you're coming off the tape, but we will sort of work that, vet that workflow and work with you to either help you implement or to execute that process for you.
Yeah, I think, Patrick, just to foray into something real quickly, you keyed in on that two challenges that I think that organizations have when they have these legacy systems out there. It's total cost of ownership, and then the aspect of security and the risk that an agency or an organization runs with having that data on a legacy platform that doesn't have that modern day security that we just talked about. So those, I think, are two very key and critical things that you mentioned.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I appreciate that. So I'm just going to give two examples here of customer scenarios, typical projects that we do. And so this first one is a Cohesity scenario. A customer was on another backup vendor for a long time, had obviously a significant amount of data backed up with that vendor when they decided to move to Cohesity, and they wanted to migrate at least some subset of that data into the Cohesity platform to get the benefits of the security and the insights and that kind of stuff. And so they came to us, and it's two things. They're deploying a new backup solution, and so there's a little bit of how's that going to go? We have to learn the new system. We have to get it up and running the right way, and then they're also getting off the old system, but they have to maintain running that system and migrate the data over a period of time. And so in this scenario, and this is a pretty typical one, we'll usually work with the customer and come up with a plan for, all right, well, let's bring in a data protection engineer. That person can help plan out the migration from your old system. Also, they're certified on the new system. So our guys that are certified on Cohesity are also, certified on other products and things. And so they'll come in and say, okay, we'll be essentially a resident support engineer. It's a remote, so I call it a remote support engineer. But basically, we'll do a flexible senior data protection engineer that will act as your backup admin during that transition period into the new platform. So we'll spend 3, 6, 12 months optimizing your Cohesity environment, hand-holding while you get, up to a level of comfort that you can run that environment. And then, in most environments, a data protection, backup guy isn't busy 24 hours a day with backup. So we also dual purpose that person and have him be a migration engineer. So during that same period, they'll be overseeing, again, planning and then executing, migrating whatever data out of that old system into the new platform. And so what's, part of, that's why I chimed in on Dave on the Gaia conversation and the secondary data, because there is a role for us in helping to get that data into the platform where you guys can then provide all those extra value to it. And so this is to me a win-win scenario for everybody. We get these calls all the time. These people want to migrate, and you don't necessarily want to just pay to migrate. It's nice if that same person can also be your backup admin and help you learn the environment and the new solution that you're deploying. So this is, again, one we've done. I think there's a number of these that we've done in federal with your team, Dave, where we're doing the exact same thing with different customers and different legacy products. It's not just limited to this one. And then I'll touch this briefly, but this is the example that I mentioned of Restore on Demand. And so this is really sort of combining the different capabilities that we have in terms of legacy data migrations and backups. And so in this scenario, customer opted not to migrate 150,000 tapes worth of data, which is understandable. There's usually a cost to that. But they did need to have access. This is, I think this is like a lifetime retention type of a scenario for some of this data. And so they had 26 data centers, 4 different backup products, different versions within those products. And they had moved to an all-disk solution, and they had all these tapes, and they basically didn't want to manage the old systems anymore. They wanted to get rid of the tapes. And so we put together a scenario where we went to all 26 sites with with trucks and guards, and collected all these tapes and brought them back to vaulting facilities where we kept them, through a vaulting partner of ours, and stored them for a 5-year period. We extracted the catalogs from all of those backup systems, put them into our system, POC, showed that we can do the restores. And then for 5 years, anytime this customer needed data off of any one of those tapes, they would call us up. We'd go find which, okay, let's go to the database, find which tape it is, get it back, and then we would restore it. It didn't matter which software wrote it, transparent to the customer. We put it on an encrypted hard drive or SFTP and send it to them. And so this is sort of, to me, the opposite end of a migration, right? So like ideally you want to migrate all the data into the new, into your new platform and get it all under management. But I recognize there's also scenarios where that's not going to happen, and it's just whatever, cost prohibitive, or it doesn't make sense for whatever reason. So this provides that, hey, you can still get access to that data, whether, what that looks like, how we get back to it, varies. We do custom solutions for every scenario. If you're a dark site, we've got to do it one way. If you can send us the tapes, it's a different thing. If we can take the tapes like this, then we can just control the whole process. But we can do it anyway in there, and everything in between. So from this up through migrating all of the data off of those 150,000 tapes and coming up with a plan for how we would do that over a required time frame, we can pretty much do any of those options. And so this, I know we're running out of time. We're in the last couple of slides here. So really just kind of to step back and recap, right? So, you know, as we talked about, there's data, there's more data, there's more complexity. The regulations are only driving more and more requirements for you to figure out answers to some of these questions about security and zero trust, et cetera. And then, of course, there's a risk. And I'm willing to probably bet money that most of you aren't getting a lot more budget, at least for data protection and data management next year. And so it really becomes a question of, does it make sense? Is it the right solution, right thing for you to do to move forward and look at modernizing your data protection solutions? And the only thing that I guess I would comment on that would be, it's probably going to cost you a lot more to do nothing than what you think it is in my experience, that silo of data that's sitting over there that you're ignoring doesn't get cheaper to manage or to keep, right? The backup vendor wants you to pay more to keep maintenance on it, and the storage platform expires, and eventually I get this call all the time from people who did nothing for 5 years and now they have to do something and it's 5 years later, right? So I would argue that looking at ways to modernize, working with our team and the Cohesity teams to find the right, you know, solution and what's the right data to move, how do we move it, how do we maintain access to it? We're here to help solve those problems and try to get it to where you can be on a path where we have a more predictable annual cost, really, because I don't think that, you know, nobody's costs stay the same year after year on these things, right? So that's all I had, really. I mean, I don't know, Dave, if you wanted to chime in with anything here in closing.
No, you mentioned it. We would love to, engage with you, answer questions. If you certainly are just even mildly interested in being able to look at modernizing your data management and data protection platform. So thank you very much for the time. Certainly appreciate everybody's attention to Patrick and I, and Karasoft, I'll turn it over to you.